Captain Alara Juden sat at the edge of the mess table, a half-finished ration sandwich in her hand and a silence in her eyes that belied her youth. The ship's overhead lights reflected in the polished steel of the table, broken by cards left scattered from a crewman's game abandoned when the shift bell rang. Around her, voices filled the Defiance mess hall with an easy din of chatter, but she listened more than she spoke, watching, taking measure, calculating what it meant to be the youngest captain the fleet had ever entrusted with a warship. The crew had not yet decided whether to admire her or doubt her. She could see it in the side glances when orders were delivered, the quiet hesitations before an acknowledgement. Most of them had trained under captains twice her age, veterans with gray in their hair and stories carved into the lines of their faces. Alara had no such years, no such stories, only the weight of a uniform that suddenly fit heavier after the death of her mentor, Captain Reese Calder, 2 months ago in a border skirmish that had turned on a moment's hesitation. His loss had propelled her upward faster than Fleet Command had planned, and the brass had spoken the promotion with ceremony, but in the quiet corners of the ship, whispers lingered. A child in command. A lucky survivor. She did not argue with them. She had learned long ago that silence could be a shield, that words were blades only when used sparingly. Instead, she studied her crew, reading their tempers, gauging loyalties. Lieutenant Karan, tall and broad-shouldered, with a permanent scowl, hid his doubts poorly. Ensign Vale, younger than most and still with the wide-eyed hunger of academy dreams, followed her with unflinching trust, almost dangerous in its purity. The others orbited somewhere between, their confidence shifting like gravity under an unstable star. The Defiant itself seemed restless. It was a ship built for more than patrols and border runs, her engines meant for long hauls into unknown space, her armaments for battles Fleet Command claimed humanity had left behind. Alara had walked its corridors since she was a cadet, shadowing Calder through every system check and combat drill, memorizing the pulse of the engines as though it were a second heartbeat. Now that heartbeat belonged to her. Their mission was clear but troubling. A colony on the rim had gone silent, the outpost of New Thessaly, home to 50,000 souls and a waypoint for trade routes stretching beyond charted sectors. The official briefing from Fleet Command spoke of equipment failure or solar interference, a communications outage, routine. Alara had not believed a word. Silence in disputed space was never routine, not with the Vaith watching. The enemy had retreated after the war, but not vanished. In the academy they had taught her the history, with clean maps and neat timelines. In her childhood, she had learned it in fire and loss, as Vaith ships burned the skies over her homeworld and left her an orphan among thousands. Now she would carry her crew into that shadow. Captain. Karan's voice cut through the mess as he approached, stiff-backed, tray balanced in one hand. He never sat without waiting for her acknowledgement, as if daring her to deny him. She gestured curtly, and he lowered himself across from her. Sensors show fluctuations near the edge of Thessaly's orbit. Interference we can't identify. Could be natural. Could be otherwise. Alara tore a bite from her sandwich, chewed, swallowed. You think it's the Vaith. I think we should turn back and wait for the rest of the fleet. Walking blind into the dark isn't strategy, it's suicide. Murmurs from nearby tables stilled. The crew always listened when Karan challenged her, waiting to see how she would respond, whether the cracks would widen. Alara leaned forward, meeting his gaze without blinking. Fleet Command sent us, because we're fast enough to reach them first. If we wait, New Thessaly could already be ash. Her voice did not rise, but the words cut with precision. If the Vaith are there, we need proof. Not rumors. Not guesses. Proof. Karan's jaw worked, but he said nothing. After a beat, he pushed back his tray and stood, muttering only, "We'll see," before leaving the hall. Conversations resumed, though quieter, subdued. Vale slid into the vacant seat, her tone bright to cover the tension. "He'll come around, Captain. He always does." Alara allowed herself the faintest of smiles, rare as sunlight in deep space. Vale's optimism was a resource as vital as oxygen. Or he won't. but he'll follow orders. The intercom chimed, drawing her back to duty. Bridge to Captain Juden. We're approaching Thessaly orbit. Alara rose, the sandwich forgotten. Her crew scattered their trays, the casual warmth of mealtime dissolving into the rigid rhythm of stations and readiness. She moved through the corridor to the bridge, every step echoing with the weight of the silence they were about to break. Stars stretched across the viewing screens when she entered, cold pinpricks against the black. And there, where New Thessaly should have been, hung a husk of a world. Cities dark, orbital stations gutted. Silence, not of malfunction, but of obliteration. The bridge crew froze, horror radiating in waves. Vale whispered, "Gods," and her hands trembled on the console. Karan's face hardened, confirmation of every doubt he had voiced. Alara did not flinch. She could not afford to. "Full scan," she ordered, voice steady. "Search for survivors. Search for anything." The sensors lit, data flooding in, painting a picture worse than silence. Wreckage of human ships drifted among the debris, their hulls torn open by weapons fire. And beyond, in the black, shadows moved, ships, dozens of them, arranged in formations that spoke not of chaos, but of strategy. The Vaith, waiting, watching. The crew looked to her, fear rising like a tide. Alara let the silence hang for a breath, then two, feeling the decision crystallize inside her chest. Fleet Command would expect her to retreat, to call for reinforcements, to play for time. But time was the enemy's weapon now. She straightened, every doubt she had carried burning away in the fire of necessity. "Helm, hold position. Keep us dark. We watch, we learn, we send what we see. No one else has eyes here. Until they do, we are the line." The crew hesitated, then obeyed. The Defiant fell into silence, engines low, sensors wide, every heart beating in tense unison. Alara stood at the center of it all, the weight of command pressing heavy yet unyielding. She was the youngest captain in fleet history. She would not be the first to run. And as the shadows shifted beyond the stars, she whispered to herself, unheard, "Not this time." The Defiant lingered in the orbit of New Thessaly, like a solitary witness at a graveyard, her crew tense beneath the silence of ruined cities and drifting wreckage. Captain Alara Juden stood at the center of the bridge, her eyes fixed on the shifting shadows of the Vaith fleet in the distance. They moved with calculated precision, ships sliding into formation with the patience of predators certain their prey had nowhere left to run. Reports filtered in. No survivors on the surface, no beacons from the stations, no voice left to call for help. The colony had been erased, and only the Defiant remained to carry the truth back to humanity. Yet every passing moment deepened the sense that retreat would not be permitted. The Vaith knew they were here. Alara ordered silence on the comms, but the crew's unease carried more force than words. Karan leaned over the tactical display, his expression locked in grim defiance. "They're baiting us," he muttered. "They want us to light up our engines, give them reason to strike. You can't seriously plan to stay hidden here." "We're not hidden," Alara replied evenly, never taking her eyes from the screen. "We're watching. Every second we remain is intelligence the fleet doesn't have. That matters more than our safety. It matters more than our lives." His voice rose, drawing glances from the helm and navigation. "It matters more than dying blind." The bridge fell quiet, the weight of her words pressing into every station. Karan clenched his jaw, but he returned to his post without further challenge. Alara felt the exchange reverberate through the crew, the widening crack between loyalty and dissent. Hours passed with the patience of stone, broken only when the Vaith struck. Their attack came swift and merciless, a cluster of ships peeling from the shadows, lances of plasma ripping across the void. The Defiant shuddered, alarm screaming as shields absorbed the brunt of the assault. "Return fire, pattern Delta," Alara commanded, voice sharp. The ship rolled into evasive maneuvers, cannons roaring against the dark. Explosions lit the void, fragments of enemy hull spinning free, Yet each victory came at cost. The Defiant shields buckled under sustained fire, consoles sparked, and one officer fell screaming as a blast tore through auxiliary power. Through the chaos, Illyra remained calm, her commands precise, her mind a weapon honed sharper with every crisis. But inside, she felt the burden of every life lost under her command, each scream an echo that would not fade. When the Vaith withdrew, leaving them battered but not broken, silence reclaimed the bridge. Smoke hung in the air, acrid and choking. Illyra steadied herself against the captain's chair, scanning the weary faces around her. Damage report. Vale's hands trembled on her console, but her voice was clear. Shields at 30%. 2 decks breached but sealed. We've lost 13. 13. She let the number etch itself into her memory, another tally in the ledger she carried. We hold. We repair what we can. And we prepare for the next wave. Karan stepped forward, unable to contain himself. With respect, Captain, this is madness. We can't fight a fleet alone. Every second we linger is another second closer to our destruction. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crew. Illyra met his gaze, steady and unyielding. If we run now, Thessaly's fate becomes Earth's fate. We are not here to win the war. We are here to see it clearly and to warn the others before it consumes them too. He stared at her, searching for weakness, then spat the word like a curse. You'll get us all killed. Illyra did not reply. Instead, she turned her focus to Vale. Initiate deep scans. Look for transmissions, signals, anything that explains why they left Thessaly in ruins. Vale nodded quickly, grateful for the order, and bent to her work. Minutes passed, tense and silent, until her eyes widened. Captain, I found something. A signal inside our ship. The bridge froze. What kind of signal? Illyra asked, her voice low. Vale swallowed. Encrypted, repeating at intervals. It's been transmitting since before we arrived. Karan's glare shifted from suspicion to fury. A traitor. The word hung heavy in the air. Betrayal among their own was a deeper wound than any Vaith weapon. Illyra forced herself to remain composed, though her stomach tightened. Trace it. Quietly. I want the source identified before anyone else suspects. Vale nodded, her fingers flying across the console. Time stretched into taut silence before she spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. It's coming from Lieutenant Darrow's terminal. Darrows, Senior Navigation Officer, a man with 20 years' service and the trust of the late Captain Calder. The revelation rippled through the bridge, like a knife. Illyra stood slowly. Bring him to me. When Darrows was escorted before her, flanked by 2 Marines, his expression was weary rather than guilty, as though the outcome had been inevitable. Captain, he said softly, you don't understand. They can't be beaten. The Vaith will take everything. The only way to survive is to show them we're willing to yield. I was trying to spare us all. Murmurs of outrage erupted, quickly silenced by Illyra's raised hand. She studied him with cool detachment, though inside she wrestled with the weight of his words. She could order his execution. Some captains would have, as an example. But she remembered Calder's lessons. Justice held more power than fear. You'll be confined to the brig, she said finally, her voice steady. You will answer for your betrayal when the fleet arrives. Until then, you will watch the Defiant do what you could not. Darrows bowed his head, defeated, and was led away. The crew returned to their stations with renewed purpose, though unease still lingered. Illyra allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection, alone in the captain's chair. The enemy was larger than they had feared, betrayal had cut them from within, and yet the mission remained the same. Hold, observe, endure. Hours later, when the scans completed, Vale whispered in awe, Captain, it's not just a fleet. It's an armada. Hundreds of ships. They're preparing to strike beyond Thessaly. The bridge fell into stunned silence. Karan's face paled, his doubts momentarily stripped by the sheer enormity of the threat. Illyra rose, her voice firm, carrying across the stunned room. Then we are humanity's only eyes upon the storm. We will not break. We will not run. If we fall, they will fall blind. And if they fall blind, Earth will fall with them. Her words settled over the crew like iron, heavy yet galvanizing. They knew now the scale of what loomed ahead, and they knew their captain would not yield. Outside the viewport, the stars burned cold and distant, the armada shifting in the dark like a gathering tide. The Defiant, battered and wounded, held her place. And at her helm stood Alara Juden, youngest captain in fleet history, defying the inevitability of annihilation with nothing but resolve. The Defiant moved through the void like a wounded predator, her hull scarred, her shields faint and flickering, but her captain unbowed. On the bridge, Alara Juden stood at the center console, eyes fixed on the endless scatter of enemy signals surrounding them. The armada was closing in, tightening the noose. She felt the weight of her crew's gazes pressing into her back, every one of them waiting for a decision that could only lead to death. Vale broke the silence first, her voice trembling. "Captain, if we transmit now, fleet will know everything. At least the message will get through before." She stopped, unwilling to speak the word. "Before we're gone." Alara's jaw tightened. "The message is already sent. That part is done. What remains is what we choose to be in the time we have left." Karan leaned forward, voice hard, no longer hiding his fear. "Then we should run. We've done our duty, Juden. We've seen what's coming. If we flee, we live to fight again." Alara turned to him slowly, and the look in her eyes made even his certainty falter. "And leave this armada free to march unchallenged? If they breach this sector, they'll strike the core worlds before reinforcements can gather. We can't defeat them, but we can slow them. We can bleed them. That is what we will do." Silence followed, heavy and absolute, until Vale whispered, "Then let's make it count." Preparations began. The crew moved with grim determination, their fear reshaped into purpose. Torpedoes were armed, power rerouted from every non-essential system into weapons and engines. The Defiant bristled with defiance worthy of her name. Alara walked the bridge slowly, memorizing each face. She knew many would not live to see the battle's end. Perhaps none of them would. But still, they stood with her. The first wave came, without warning. Dozens of Vaith ships surged from the dark, plasma fire streaking across the void. The Defiant spun into their midst, cannons blazing, tearing through hulls with ruthless precision. Explosions painted the stars, fragments scattering like sparks. For a moment, the impossible seemed within reach. They fought not as a battered crew, but as a single, unyielding blade. But the tide was endless. For every Vaith ship destroyed, 3 more closed in. Shields collapsed under the onslaught, decks buckled, and fire tore through the corridors. Reports of casualties filled the comms, voices breaking as static consumed them. On the bridge, Vale's station exploded in a spray of sparks. She cried out, collapsing against her console, blood streaking her temple. Alara dropped beside her, gripping her hand. "Stay with me." Vale's eyes flickered open, filled with the same faith she had always carried. "I told you you'd make them believe." Her voice was a whisper, then silence. Alara pressed her forehead to the ensign's cooling hand for a heartbeat, then rose with fire burning through her grief. Karan manned the tactical station now, his voice raw. "They're breaking through on all sides. If we don't fall back, we'll be torn apart." Alara stared at the shifting formation of the Vaith fleet, her mind racing through possibilities. She saw their command ship, larger, darker, pulsing at the center like a spider in its web. Destroy it, and perhaps the armada would falter. It was suicide, but then so was every option left. She locked eyes with Karan. "Take the helm. Set a course for their flagship." His expression shifted from shock to grim acceptance. "Aye, Captain." The Defiant roared forward, engines burning beyond safe limits. Enemy fire raked their flanks, tearing through plating, ripping away sections of the hull. One by one, crew members were lost, voices cut short mid-report, stations abandoned to fire and vacuum. Alara stood firm at the center, refusing to bend, every breath a defiance against the inevitability of annihilation. They broke through the last line of defenders, the Vaith flagship looming before them like a fortress of steel and shadow. Alara gave the final order. All power to engines. Prepare for collision. The Defiant surged ahead, a broken spear hurled into the heart of the enemy. The impact tore through space with a brilliance that outshone the stars. For a moment, the void was filled with light as both ships were consumed in fire. When the glare faded, the Vaith armada wavered. Without their command ship, their formations crumbled, their discipline fractured. The surviving vessels scattered, retreating into the darkness from which they had come. Humanity had been spared for now. Among the drifting wreckage, a single emergency pod spun slowly, beacon faint but alive. Inside, Alara Juden floated in silence, her body broken, her spirit unyielding. She stared out at the wreckage of her ship, at the absence of her crew, and felt the unbearable weight of being the last one standing. Rescue came hours later, the fleet arriving too late to witness the sacrifice, but not too late to find her. When they pulled her aboard, battered and barely conscious, one admiral whispered the truth that would echo through history. She had been the youngest captain the fleet had ever known, and now she was its last survivor of Thessaly, the woman who had stood alone against the dark. Alara closed her eyes, the taste of ash and fire still in her lungs, and thought not of triumph, but of her crew, their laughter, their courage, their final moments. She would carry them with her into every dawn that followed. For though the Defiant had fallen, her name and the defiance she embodied would live on, a promise whispered into the void. Humanity would not yield.